Welcome to HornbillTV's Beyond Headlines with Almuli. It was big money those days. You got paid about 70 to 80 rupees for a day's work pounding gravel at construction sites. If you went to dig earth or pave roads, you were paid about, I think, 50 rupees for a day's work. Generally, it took about 2 days to clear earth to build a medium-sized house those days. So you went home richer by about 100 rupees. I have dug toilets, I've worked at construction sites, I have even stolen wood, firewood, animal feed from the forest, and I've stolen bamboo from the forest to sell. Once members of a village near Woka town caught about 4 of us stealing bamboo in their fields. We wanted to sell them. They caught us, they whipped us with bamboo sticks, and they let us go with a warning. The daily wage work we engaged in those days were called hajira. I think it's called hajira, or daily wage hire. So 100 rupees was a big amount those days. You bought a bag of rice for about 50 rupees, I remember, a pair of trousers for about 60 or 70 rupees. And those days, it was cheaper, a lot cheaper. But these days, you need at least an SBI bank loan to buy a packet of what? Moshong Kata biscuit. We also carried water for $5 per bucket for people. Simply, it was not uncommon for us senior Naga millennial generation people to engage in manual and menial labor, because there were few non-Naga laborers those days except for small businesses. Now, the only non-Naga persons who engaged in this were mostly from Bihar or UP. Anyone else who was a non-Naga was a teacher. So most of them engaged in menial and manual labor, and they were primarily coolies or porters, individuals who carried heavy loads on their heads or carried stuff home for you for a small fee, maybe 20 to 30 rupees. Now, we don't see them often in our residential areas now, but in the 80s until the 90s, districts such as Moshong and Kohima, Woka, and especially Dimapur those days had many coolies. We used to call them the deshwalis too, deshwaliya. So you pay them about 10 to 20 to 30 rupees for carrying a bag of rice home for you. How times have changed for the Naga people in Nagaland, ladies and gentlemen. It is true that technology, modern economics, higher living standards, infrastructural development, and even efficient domestic management have made life smoother and easier for us than it was in the past few decades. But somehow along the way, we may have lost much of those muscles. This is largely due to borrowed labor and substituted workers from floating migrant populations that have now become part of our daily lives in Nagaland. In 1995, Nagaland cooked its own food, but in 2025, we are being carried on palanquins by non-Naga persons who earn more or equivalent to the average government employee today. In 2025, we are talking about ILP, illegal immigrants, unemployment. Whatever happened along the way? What did we lose? First, here are some of the primary reasons why the modern Naga youth hate or thinks that menial and manual work is beneath him. Now, the first reason is our colonial legacy and the missionary influence. It is true that the American missionaries introduced us to Jesus Christ, Christianity. It also brought the face and thoughts of the world outside to us. This also meant somewhere along the way we lost some of the things that defined us as a people, such as simple living, pastoral and agrarian lifestyles, and a life without the pressure of economic standards and globalist ambitions. Now, when education came, it also brought with it the concepts of success, social stature, wealth, dominance, superiority, and power, ideas of power on an epic scale. This meant Western education placed a higher premium on governance, governmental, clerical, or leadership roles. Now, therefore, farming or pastoral lifestyles came to be considered very menial. Now, over time, this mindset created an ecosystem where aspirations leaned toward government service and formal sector jobs because they indicated success, the illusion of success, prestige, power, and modern living. Now, cultural narratives often reinforce the idea that educated individuals should not stoop to do physical work. That was the idea. The second reason is prestige projection and social perception of success. Now, manual and menial labor are now often associated with the lower status categories in many communities. Yes, and Nagaland is no different. As I said previously, the idea of being educated or of being in a higher social stratum often gets translated into an entitlement mindset that makes us think, oh, we deserve something better. We deserve someone better. This outlook develops into aspirations that place higher value on things that fit or validate that illusion. For instance, if you have a graduate or a postgraduate degree, or your family is affluent, somewhere up there, the likelihood of you working in a job that serves others, and I mean those not so big position ones, it's practically zero. So naturally you will seek positions that are symbolic of success, prestige, power, and something that makes you look modern instead. Now, where did all this come from? First, from our parents. That mindset was given to us by our parents, unfortunately. Now, blame and finger pointing are as old as history, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I know. 2 centuries ago, during the Ottoman Empire, young people revolted against the ruling regime and overthrew it. They blamed their elders, their parents, and the ruling class for the mess their generation was suffering during that time, during that empire. Now, my parents' generation, I know this because we know the community conversations and the history. My parents' generation blamed my grandparents' generation for the morass Nagaland went through since 1963. They used to point their fingers at my grandparents, their generations. Interestingly again, my generation blames my parents' generation for the corruption, for the violence, and for the erosion of morality in Nagaland, for instance. Likewise, our generation will blame us. In turn, their grandchildren will blame our children. Human nature. Anyway, our parents, who understood the rigor and the hard life that agriculture brought to people, believed that physical work was not the life they wanted for us, their children. So Naga parents insisted that we must become big officers, government leaders. It was no different for me and my friends too. My own mother. My mother initially wanted me to pursue the NPSC and the UPSC examinations in the footsteps of my father. My father and all of his brothers were all government officials holding major state positions those days. Now, there was a time in college that I dreamt of even becoming the Chief Minister of Nagaland too. And many of us, many of you also aspire for big stuff in life. The idea that our lives would be better and easier with position, power, and wealth came from our parents and our grandparents, actually, speaking in the context of the Naga family. And no doubt, we all want our children to be successful that way. Why not? But while the intention is very pure, the spirit may be flawed. That's what I want to say. Honest livelihood and gainful employment, regardless of status, may have been important ideals we might have missed in our domestic education. The result is that we no longer want to do anything with menial and manual work, which means almost every earning opportunity in Nagaland in both the organized production sector and the unorganized services sector absorbs only non-Naga individuals. No disrespect, but that's a fact. Because we believe those jobs are beneath us. We think that we are better than those jobs. So as long as we view white-collar jobs as symbols of success, social mobility, economic security, prestige and respectability, particularly government jobs, we Naga youths, our Naga children will struggle with a lot of things in life. That brings us to the third point, closely related to the second we just talked about, our dependence on government employment, ladies and gentlemen. We do not want any of the vast number of job opportunities in the organized production and unorganized labor and services sector in Nagaland. Rather, we look for government jobs instead. The irony is this: there are practically none to few opportunities for the thousands of Naga youth seeking government jobs. Historically, the economy in Nagaland has been heavily dependent on the public sector. As of March 31st, for instance, March 31st, 2018, Nagaland had a total of about 125,299 government employees, 87,279 males, and about 38,020 females. But the government openings have run out. It's gone, it's saturated, no more space and openings. So with limited industrialization and private sector opportunities for us, we had grown up in that too, believing that the ultimate breakthrough was a government job. This narrow career aspiration created a deep-rooted mindset that considered private sector and manual jobs less desirable, less respectable. Yes, the average Naga youth will not engage in physically demanding livelihoods given a choice, yes. But to be fair, it's equally true that Nagaland also lacks an organized industrial and economic capital. We don't have the infrastructure either. Our state lacks significant manufacturing and industrial sectors that could generate skilled and unskilled labor opportunities with decent wages. Now, fifth reason, our educational system, as in many parts of India, is heavily theory-based. It's not aligned with local economic realities, ladies and gentlemen. Our schools and our colleges, they teach us literacy, but not education. Vocational training and skill development are limited and under-promoted too. So students are often not equipped or encouraged to take up trade or farming or technical roles. Now, sixth reason, the Nagas' armed conflict and political instability. Years and years and decades of insurgency and the unresolved political issue, they have created a sense of uncertainty and instability for Naga youths. Now, this led to underdeveloped artistic and creative expressions, or it led to the suppression of this potential to express artistically. The constant exposure to political rhetoric, we read about it every day in the newspapers, political conflict, and the media's obsession with bad news has consistently and constantly preoccupied our mental space. This means our thinking is not rewired to look at the world in terms of challenge and success. Rather, we have developed a subconscious acknowledgement that few things in life will get better to inspire us to achieve anything more than merely landing a job. That's our biggest aspiration. And that's what the conflict has done to our minds. This has stunted economic growth and discouraged entrepreneurship and private investment, which otherwise would have helped normalize skilled manual jobs as viable careers. Many Naga youths migrate to Delhi, yes, Bangalore, or even abroad for education and work. Now, this exposure again reinforces their desire for what you call sophisticated jobs in the corporate or hospitality sectors. We want a validation of success and leadership achievements rather than building local trades, skills, or holding ourselves up economically. Seventh reason, the lack of entrepreneurial culture among the Nagas, historically speaking. While this is slowly changing, thankfully, The previous Naga generation, especially our grandparents and our parents' generation, often discouraged business or trades in favor of government jobs. Business was what used to be called, and I mean no disrespect here for our non-Naga viewers, it used to be in Nagaland, business used to be in Nagaland called Plains Manu Laga Kam, or for Indians only, not for Nagas. Therefore, it was belittled, insulted. Even during my times, you barely came across a business person who was a Naga. So thankfully, this is changing with many of our youth building a future in business and entrepreneurship. However, again, without any strong examples of successful local entrepreneurs in Nagaland, I think and I feel there's been little motivation for many Naga youth to take risks or to build independent business careers. The truth is, at least in my experience, there seem to be youth who apparently have found success in the business sector, trading, entrepreneurship, but there seem to be those who have strong financial backing, political backing, children of big government leaders or big business people, or individuals who have an affluent family background. You know what I mean, because the majority of business youths I know who are struggling are those who started with own capital or from loans. Now once the production capital is finished, either you close shop or take more secondary loans and you jump into debt. It's a very tough story. So I think we need to be cautious about encouraging our youth to just randomly, business karibi. I don't think that's something really productive if you really don't have any proper administrative, political, and even social backup in that case. So unless they have ample financial and administrative support, then I think we should tread carefully in this regard. So what are the options? It's not possible that we build an economy for Nagaland in just a few years, but I think our parents should start encouraging our children to choose any livelihood that's honest and gainful, not really based on position and security. I've been in the media for about 20 years now. I've had a lot of opportunities to meet with interns, new employees and recruits. And when I asked them what made them join, most of them, they have replied they wanted to be the editor, the executive editor, the associate editor. But most of them are just barely out of college. So eventually when they come to be observed in a company, they have to start somewhere down there. So my point is, a good place to start would be the labor sector. Come on, I've taught guitar music. I have sold paintings and handicraft. I made them. And I've even painted billboards for shops for a small fee when I was young. I'm not saying this is something you can do all your life or get rich from it. My point is, just start somewhere instead of waiting for the big break. The big break won't come unless you start building experience, skills, credibility, and most of all, a clarity about what fits you and what you ought to be doing in life, ladies and gentlemen, my young friends out there. See, I know people who make 40 to 50,000 rupees a month by selling chana mix down there. I'm not kidding. Dimapur has lots of them, in fact, and that's a rough estimate. One person I know started selling chana mix, that rampam in chana mix thing. Started selling chana mix about a year ago along around in Chumou up there. She makes about 1,000 to 1,700 to 1,800 on a bad day, every day, on a bad day. But on a good day, it's generally in the range of 2,000 to 2,500 to 700 a day. That's how much she makes. You do the math in a month. She has no staff, just her and a young son who brings the rampam mixture and the tea and the boiled chana matar. Of course, you put in the collateral expenses and the running budget, but she still gets at least 40 to 45 rupees a month. 40,000 to 45,000 rupees a month, excuse me. And 40,000 is the average salary of the average government employee in Nagaland, or at least 2 times higher earnings income that many white-collar private sector job positions in Nagaland offer. Now, according to Vice, that news media house, and the Times of India, it is difficult to pinpoint the richest street food sellers in India because there are a lot of them and there is no financial oversight. But surveys have suggested that many Indian street vendors, particularly those selling chaat, those chana mix and pan and Indian snacks, are surprisingly rich. And many of them are even millionaires in most cases. These vendors often generate substantial income, investing in real estate and accumulating assets. In Kanpur, UP, a Times of India report revealed over 250 chaat and pan sellers on a street, single street. They were found to be millionaires. We have no excuse. Just do a small web search, including research about Delhi's street food business. I think it was released about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm sure if there were a financial oversight, we'll have many street food vendors in Nagaland too who are doing very well. Now, the point is not to start a chow momo shop, my young friends. I'm not saying go down and start mixing chana mix and sell. My point is start small. Start somewhere, just do something, just start anywhere. Anything from scratch, especially those jobs which you depend on migrants to do for you. Another example, one of my new neighbors recently built a house just a few meters away from our place. So since the past several months, I'd been hearing a lot of Western rock music and hip hop from that building during their work. They play like Lil Wayne, Drake, Justin Bieber, Heart, and even System of a Down. I kept wondering why in the world have construction workers from Bihar or UP or Bangladesh have actually started listening to Eminem or Justin Bieber or heavy metal. So I checked in. The construction workers were Naga youths, about 5 of them. It seems they had traveled from another district just to work on that house, a proper concrete RCC building. Unbelievable. Let's do a show on those legends later. Now, Naga construction workers and Naga chana mix sellers are still a rarity in Nagaland, but my point is do something, start somewhere. That means easier work for the government, the district administration, or the Naga students in addressing issues such as illegal immigration in Nagaland. Easier work for us to build an entirely local run economy. Look at Mochong district and what the Ao Naga people have done for the district and in fact for the local community. An economy that's entirely in the hands of the Ao people alone. Unbelievable. The illegal immigrants stream into Nagaland because there is employment. Read that again. They come in here because there's a lot of employment opportunities. It's because there is money in places we don't want to get our boots dirty yet. Recently, the newly formed Inner Line Regulation Commission of the Naga Students Federation listed out a number of demands for the government of Nagaland to check the influx of illegal immigrants in Nagaland. Here are some of the important demands. Among them, the NSF demanded a centralized database system that would store all the ILP data issued to outsiders entering Nagaland. New establishments and strengthening of the ILP checkpoints were the second demand. Now, the porous Nagaland borders with Assam is posing a big challenge to the implementation of the inner line permit. For this, the NSF has asked the government of Nagaland to establish new checkpoints and to strengthen the existing ones. The NSF has also demanded creation of a separate ILP enforcement wing for post-ILP issuance monitoring. Another demand that the NSF made was for transparency in the collection of ILP fees. The NSF requested the government to make public the amount of money that has been or is collected from the ILP issuances to date. The NSF also demanded to know how that money was spent. And I think that is a very important demand they're making. That said, the government has been asked to make sure that no Indian citizens having valid and universally accepted documents should be disqualified from being issued an ILP in Nagaland. In this regard, the NSF suggested valid Aadhaar or EPIC cards to be the only basic criteria for documentation qualification for an Indian person to get an ILP here. Now, the NSF also demanded severity of penalty for defaulters and, most importantly, stop renewing ILP. The NSF doesn't want any more renewals for people who have been issued ILP. Now, the ILP issued to outsiders entering Nagaland should not be renewed under any circumstances and at any cost. That's what the NSF has demanded. Now, no degree of exertion by the government of Nagaland or students can help build the local economy or address the issue of illegal immigrants in Nagaland, ladies and gentlemen, I think, to be fair. But I know this sounds so simple and easier said than done, but believe me, the only key that will work in partnership with our government enforcement and community movements such as the one started by the NSF is this: go in and start taking over the jobs on the ground. And the problem just might be at least 2/3 of the problem might be solved. Migrants are flooding into Nagaland because we have a lot of jobs. Thank you for watching Hornbill TV, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ali. See you next time.